One of my favorite things about making these videos is getting to tell stories from all over the world. We've told stories from Asia, Europe, Africa, the Americas, and Australia. But today, we're headed somewhere we haven't been yet. We're going Caribbean. This is the tale of two pirates who were caught in a deadly game of chicken while sailing their ships through the Caribbean. Our story begins with our two ships. The first is the Ranger, captained by the infamous Bartholomew Roberts. And the second is the Royal Fortune, captained by the not quite as infamous Thomas Lawrence. These two were both working for the same guy, the privateer Henry Jennings. Yeah, you heard that right. They weren't enemies, they were allies. Now, if you're thinking that a privateer is just another name for a pirate, well, then you'd be correct. Privateers were basically pirates who got a noble title, so they could terrorize shipping lanes for the country that gave them that title. And yeah, back then, there was quite the difference between being a pirate and getting an official stamp of approval from a monarch. It made it so that when a privateer attacked and took over a ship, they didn't get branded as pirates. Instead, they would simply claim that they had captured the vessel because they were acting under the orders of said monarch. Henry Jennings was a privateer, or at least he started out that way. He was given his noble title by King George I of England in 1716. That title, along with letters of marque, which are like fancy documents giving him permission to attack other ships, allowed him to operate for the next 2 years, taking riches from Spanish vessels. His fleet consisted of 3 ships: the Ranger, the Royal Fortune, and the Pearl. In 1718, Jennings set his sights on the city of Cartagena in modern-day Colombia. Back then, and even now, Cartagena was a major port city, and it was filled with treasure. Lots of gold and silver was stored in the warehouses around the city. So Jennings and his fleet set up shop nearby and began intercepting any ship that left the harbor. The trio sank to Spanish galleons and stole their cargo. Then they anchored off the coast of the city and sent out rowboats to grab people off the ships that managed to escape the waters. Anyone who tried to flee inland was stopped by Jennings' men stationed on the beaches. For 5 days, the privateers pillaged the riches from every ship that came into or out of the city. They collected upwards of 400 pieces of 8 per man. It's 400,400 pieces of 8. But then something happened that no one expected. While at anchor off the coast of Cartagena, Jennings received a message from the Spanish captain of one of the ships they had plundered. He claimed that he wasn't actually a Spanish captain, but rather a privateer himself, commissioned by the Spanish governor of Cartagena to hunt down and punish those who preyed on trade in the Caribbean. Apparently, the Spanish weren't too happy with how things went down in Cartagena. Jennings and his crew were ordered to stop their attacks immediately, hand over all the goods they stole, and prepare to be arrested. You can probably guess that Jennings didn't really feel like doing any of those things. So instead, he prepared for battle. The next morning, he and the captains of the 2 other ships, Roberts and Lawrence, met with the Spanish privateer in the water between the ships. They discussed how things were going to go down and how they were going to divide up the spoils. No one could have predicted what happened next. As the meeting was coming to a close, Roberts got pissed. Without warning, he pulled out his pistol and shot the Spanish privateer in the head. Yeah, you heard that right. Roberts just straight up murdered the other guy. At that point, it didn't matter if the dude was an actual pirate or a real privateer. Roberts still killed him. Once Roberts had dispatched the opposition, the other 2 ships opened fire on the Spanish vessels, and it was all over but the shouting. Once the gun smoke cleared, both the Ranger and the Royal Fortune had sustained damage. Roberts' ship was leaking badly, and Lawrence's was on fire. And to top it all off, neither ship had any anchors. They were stuck adrift in the Caribbean. With their supplies gone and leaks in their hulls, the crews of both ships prepared to abandon them and get on the other ship. Here's where the story gets kind of weird, though. See, both Roberts and Lawrence figured that their ships were done for, but when Lawrence approached the Ranger, Roberts refused to let him and his crew board. He only allowed them to come aboard after Lawrence promised to give him half of everything on board the Royal Fortune. Lawrence agreed, but it was a bit of a lie. He never intended on giving Roberts anything. Lawrence had his own problems to worry about. His ship was on fire and sinking fast. So once Roberts and his crew got on board, Lawrence hoped that he could sneak away unnoticed. But Roberts caught on to his plan and forced him to stay. Both crews scrambled to bail water as their ships continued to leak and drift further out to sea as they sailed. Roberts put Lawrence in charge of repairing the Ranger-S sails so they could catch some wind and hopefully get out of the situation they found themselves in. But Roberts wanted to make sure that Lawrence wasn't planning on double-crossing him, so he chained the other captain to the mast. Oh, and Roberts also decided that since they were both stuck on his ship, Lawrence and his crew would need to start performing extra labor. That there was only one ship, someone had to take the wheel, and someone had to bail water at all times. Lawrence and his men weren't exactly thrilled at the prospect of having to do work, but they had little choice. The men worked throughout the night, repairing the sails and bailing water. But around 2 a.m., a storm rolled in and wrecked what little progress they had made. Waves crashed over the deck and the wind threatened to tear the patched sails right off the ship. Dot, dot, dot. In the middle of the chaos, Roberts spotted a light on the horizon. He and the rest of the crew quickly bailed out their pumps to prepare to greet whoever was out there. But when they got close enough to call out to the ship, they learned that it was just a lighthouse on the island of St. James. They were close to land. But no one on board the Ranger knew it. No one except for Lawrence, who used his knowledge of the area to secretly guide the ship closer to shore. He pretended to be injured and unable to help with the steering, but that was just an act. He was hoping to save his own ass. And when the sun finally came up, he was able to steer the ship towards a small inlet near the shore. Just before dawn, Roberts realized what Lawrence was trying to do, but it was too late. The ship had already entered the inlet. Once inside, Roberts freed Lawrence from his chains and the two captains raced to shore to warn the others. But they were too late. Soldiers from the British garrison on the island had already surrounded them, guns pointed. It seems that Lawrence had contacted the authorities on the island before leaving Cartagena. He told them about the plight of the two ships and convinced them to come help. So now Roberts and his crew were facing arrest. There's actually some debate about what happened next. One account claims that Roberts refused to surrender and fought against the soldiers until he was killed. The other says that he surrendered without a fight. Either way, all of his crew were taken prisoner and sentenced to life in the infamous Tower of London. Lawrence fared much better. Not only did he avoid prison, but he also kept all the loot he acquired during the attacks on the Spanish ships. In fact, the whole ordeal turned out pretty well for him. After receiving a noble title for helping capture Roberts, he spent the rest of his life hanging out at taverns and brothels with the money he stole from those Spanish ships. So there you have it, the tale of two pirates who battled it out in the Caribbean and ended up side by side in the end. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time for more historical tales.